Hello and welcome back to Bossing Taxidermy with Mr. F, the only place on the internet where you can well and truly get stuffed. Kidding. It's Bossing English with Mr. F. Today, OCR A-level English literature, and something I think is one of the trickiest things about the exam, which is Hamlet Section A. So we're going to be looking at approaches to that and things you could do to have an idea of what's expected. So the first thing I'm going to point you to is these resources, and I'll link them in the description below. So these are called sample question paper and sample responses. The big proviso here, as always, is that an adult has written this, not an A-level student, but it's still really useful reading. So if you flick through this, and I don't think it will let me do it. Oh, yes, it will. So if I flick through there, you will see that there is a sample Hamlet extract, and then you'll go to this one, and I'll just flick back so you can see what it looks like when you download it. It looks like that, and you just need to skip through to the answers. You also get a section B answer as well, so they do it for the other texts. But we're interested in Hamlet, which is an 8, and then you can read this response and see how did they answer this Section A question, exploring Shakespeare's use of language and its dramatic effects, and that will give you an idea of what's required, and they give you a little commentary as well, and then onwards you can see a response to the Section B question, which you'll find just after there. So I think that's really the first thing I would do, and then I'd have an understanding of what an examiner writing an answer, because it's come from the exam board, is really that's kind of like a model ideal answer, or even if it's slightly unrealistic, that an A-level student would be able to write quite at that level, in my opinion. All right, mark scheme. It's AO2 dominant, and there is a clue in the question that that's the case. If we go back here, you'll see it says, discuss the following passage. So it always pinpoints the passage in the play, and then exploring Shakespeare's use of language and its dramatic effects, which is the trigger, the key, that it is AO2, that's the dominant AO. And it does say language, but if you look at the mark scheme, it talks about discussion of effects, and that's very generalized, isn't it? We know AO2 is all about shaping meaning. So discussion of effects, including dramatic effects, that's very important, and that's mentioned in the question. But here it says language, structure, and form. So bear that in mind. This also includes effective use of analytical methods, so it's not enough just to spot a metaphor or some use of imperatives, interrogatives, whatever it might be. You need to explain the effect that they're having, why they're there, what dramatic purpose they're serving. And also included in this is the use of quotations and references. These need to be critically addressed, blended into discussion, so they should always be there to support something you're saying, not just dumped in there. And then we've got AO1, critical concepts, terminology, and a well-structured, coherent and detailed argument written in the right register. All right, so far so good. So I'm just going to give you a few steps to help you get started. And then we'll have a look at this together. I've already looked at this, so I've got a paper version that I've done. What I could do is maybe share that document with you, and again, like previously with the unseen dystopian extract, you could download it, print it off, do it by hand with highlighters and a pen. What are the things that you would say about it? So pause the video and then come back and compare what you found with what I've found, and maybe that's a useful way of practicing. All right, let's go. So it's really important to contextualize the scene. They pinpoint the scene. The previous one was Act 3, Scene 4. Here we're at the very start of the play, Act 1, Scene 1, right at the beginning. So we might think of Freytag's pyramid, and we can look at that later in a later video maybe, or you can ask your teacher, what is that? But you probably covered that maybe Key Stage 3 in terms of writing stories, and maybe Key Stage 4 when you're looking at your Macbeth or whatever play you did then, because it's just really a way of looking at the rising action, the climax, falling action, so where we are in the heroic journey of a tragic hero. We're dealing with a tragedy here, so that's quite useful. The other thing I would recommend doing is think dramatically. Think about character arcs and relationships. What do we learn from this exchange about different characters and how they interact? Think about thematic elements. Are any thematic elements like surveillance or madness or love being introduced here or being built upon here or emphasized? Is this just simply a scene that creates a lot of atmosphere and where the audience is being given generic tropes that they're expecting, so they're being fed things in anticipation of what comes later? Basically, try and think, what do we learn here about these people or the plot? What changes? If this scene was missing, what would be lost? And maybe if we do that, then that can help us just get a grip on what's happening here. All right, so let's have a go at this. I'll use this pen over here. All right, contextualize. We're at the opening of a play. It's a revenge tragedy. So there are the generic conventions of a revenge tragedy. So we need to introduce a ghost. So what what Shakespeare's focus on here is ramping up tension and anticipation of the ghost's appearance. So we get that from the get-go. That's his dramatic impulse here. How do we get that? So what we can expect is fear. We can expect to have a fear created, both in the characters on stage that then will transfer to the audience. Well, that immediately is created first from the setting, a gun platform on the battlements of Elsinore. So we get there's a kind of threat, isn't there? If we're on the battlements, we're kind of outside, exposed, there's a threat maybe. These are soldiers who are defending Elsinore. We don't know against what or who. So already that's a situation where people are on edge, aren't they? Because they're on watch, they're on guard. And we immediately start with an interrogative. It's a fancy way of saying question. And this introduces from the get-go the theme of questioning and self-questioning, and that haunts the play. What follows next is a series of rapid, short exchanges, which the fancy way of saying this is stigomythia. So these are very short exchanges, rapid, and these exchanges are done in a panicky. This creates a kind of panicky atmosphere, and that's that fear. That element of fear that creates anticipation that something is not right, there's something worrying these soldiers, and because the audience is expecting the appearance of a ghost, eventually we will get an understanding that it's not an enemy without a physical form, but something even more terrifying. So here we're getting lots of challenges back and forth between these people. Who's there? Nay, answer me, stand and unfold yourself. Long live the king, Bernardo he. So here's that stigomythia, those rapid, short exchanges. And there's a lot of challenging and threatening happening here. People not giving way to other people. So what we can get from this, the audience is unsure why these are soldiers, what the threat is. At this stage, we don't know that there's two threats, that there's a ghost and that Norway has threatened in young Fortinbras to invade Denmark. So it sets the scene as well. The other thing we get here is some kind of image painting of where we are and what's happening. Remember, sometimes these plays were performed in daylight. So here we're being told that the hour is 12, it's bitter cold. So the idea of a cold, dark, silent night will create that atmosphere and menace that the audience need to understand if this is a daylight performance. What else have we got here? We do get kind of hints of something being unwell. I am sick at heart. This could introduce, this is metaphorical, isn't it? He's not literally sick. So this introduces the idea of illness and corruption. There's something wrong here. Another interrogative, have you had quiet guard, not a mouse stirring? That in itself suggests that on other nights they haven't had quiet guard, and we understand that there's an edginess to these questions where people don't want to name something. There's something nameless that's occurring or has occurred, and that's why they're checking to see if the guard has been quiet. Bid them make haste. There's a sense of urgency created with that phrase. And then we have a more leading character, which is Horatio, enters the scholar Horatio, friend of Hamlet. Another thing that's interesting about this are the professions of loyalty both to the king, and that suggests that maybe they're not. There's the enemy might be physical. Later we learn that it's Norway. Liegeman to the Dane. The Dane is a friend to this ground. I'm a friend of Elsinore, and loyal to the Dane. The Dane here is the king, which is now Claudius. So there's pledges of loyalty and protestations that they're loyal. And there's obviously a need to do this, to not be confused with someone else, which we later learn is Norway. So these, kind of exclamations, protestations of loyalty are quite interesting. I just need to, unfortunately, that will just disappear because that's what it does. What else do we have here? Horatio, more exchanges, greetings happen here. And then we get something interesting, which kind of anticipates Hamlet. What is Horatio there? A piece of him. This is quite interesting. It's almost like the wordplay or punning we would expect from Hamlet, and because he's his friend, maybe that some of that's rubbed off on him. But it's slightly peculiar there. Now we start to get lots of euphemisms or metaphors or kind of metonyms, ways of talking about something without naming it. Has the thing appeared again tonight? I have seen nothing. Horatio says, it is what? That's a pronoun again for the thing there, but our fantasy, and will not let believe take hold of him, touching this dreaded sight twice seen of us. So they've seen whatever it is twice, and that's why there's that edginess earlier in the extract. So the audience is obviously expecting, through generic convention, a ghost, but what's interesting here is how Shakespeare delays that thing. Dreaded sight, obviously it's something terrible. The adjective dreaded there is quite interesting. Now, I will link to a website that I found yesterday, very useful, which is to do with really close analysis, and it starts to kind of hammer into some of this language here. And they found it quite ironic, this idea, Horatio will not let belief take hold of him, touching this dreaded sight between of us, because we're dealing with a phantom, a ghost, and the idea of something tangible that you can hold seems at odds with something that's intangible and not able to behold. So there's something quite, kind of strange about that. Now, why won't Horatio let hold of this? He says it's our fantasy. Well, Horatio is educated. He's a skeptic. He has his philosophy. Remember, Hamlet mentions that later. We think that philosophy might be Stoicism. So the scholar and educated Horatio is a rational Renaissance man like Hamlet. So there's a concept there. And so refuses to believe in ghost stories. So he's going to watch with them tonight. Actually, what's interesting is when Marcellus tells us why Horatio's here and how he has dismissed their beliefs, we see this immediately from this kind of non-verbal exclamation here, or interjection we might say, from Horatio, tush tush, 'twill not appear. So it's really dismissive, isn't it, that? And that sets up a contrast, a juxtaposition with this initial skepticism and disbelief and the actual belief when it takes hold of him, when he actually sees it. Okay, we're coming to the end of the extract, but there's some really interesting things here. We get a command, sit down a while. Interesting, because one of the things that's created here is a sense of hierarchy. We really get that towards the end, where the soldiers entreat Horatio to speak to the ghost because he's educated and because ghosts were supposed to be spoken to in Latin. But at times we get this hierarchy kind of challenged a little bit. So here we get Bernardo giving an imperative, a command to Horatio, who should be his senior. All right, we'll move on. It's so annoying, this thing. Here we go. Now, here we get some kind of interesting militaristic language. We get this kind of semantic field of militaristic language, which we would expect because we're dealing with soldiers here. Let us once again assail your ears that are so fortified against our stories. So it's a kind of extended metaphor of militaristic language. We could talk about either a semantic field of militaristic language or an extended metaphor that the soldier is wanting to break down the defences, the sceptical defences of the scholar Horatio here. That's quite interesting. And then as he sits down, we get this aura of menace created. As we're about to hear what has been happening with this dreaded sight. And of course, what's brilliant here, a brilliant piece of dramatic dramaturgy, wow, eloquent, is the fact that in the middle of the ghost story being retold, the ghost appears. So it interrupts interrupts the narrative, the retelling of the story in the most dramatic way possible by, better than words, the ghost itself. And disproving Horatio's skepticism. All hell breaks loose. Peace, break off, look. So we get lots of kind of short exclamatory expressions there as panic sets in. And then we begin to understand that this ghost is just no ghost, like the king that's dead. And then the soldiers kind of fall back behind the scholar. And the hierarchy reasserts itself. Thou art a scholar, speak to it, Horatio. Looks it not like the king, mark it, Horatio. It would be spoken to, question it, Horatio. So here we get this kind of three imperatives, don't we? Speak to it, Horatio, mark it, Horatio, question it, Horatio. And then the hierarchy reasserts itself. But what's ironic, maybe, is that soldiers are hiding behind Horatio. Hierarchy reasserts itself, but there's a sense of irony in the soldiers hiding behind him there. Now, a really, really good thing to analyse here would be this bit here. It harrows me with fear and wonder. Now, harrows is a word that is more linked to agriculture and kind of breaking up the soil. It's an agricultural tool, but here it's like his soul is being pulverized or kind of broken down, and really it's not his soul but his whole belief system, isn't it? I got that from this website that I'll link to, so I'm not claiming that as my own, but I think it's very good. So his rational belief system as a Renaissance man who doesn't believe in ghosts is broken down, and that verb harrow is doing a lot of work there because it's being stolen from its agricultural usage and used here to mean the painful pulverizing of a belief system. And again, a lovely phrase here, fear and wonder. Horatio does this a lot, hendiadys, kind of the doubling. And again, this could introduce the doubling that runs throughout the play. So joining these two maybe contrasting ideas together, it's almost like the sublime, isn't it? Fear and wonder, we'd call that feeling of the sublime when we see something enormous like a mountain, or we look down from a skyscraper and it overwhelms us. So hendiadys, doublings, that would be some good language to use there. And then finally we get Horatio speaking to the ghost. Why must it be Horatio who speaks to him? Well, according to Elizabethan wisdom, ghosts cannot speak until spoken to, and an educated man, i.e. a Latin speaker, was required to do that. So that's why they're falling back on Horatio here. So that would be nice AO1 critical concept that you could employ there. So what does Horatio say? What art thou that usurpest this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form? There's more of that hendiadys again. being used. Fair and warlike form, also kind of contrasted ideas, aren't they? Slightly oxymoronic. Fair here meaning beautiful, but warlike, i.e. means he's dressed like a warrior. So there's that kind of understanding that he looks like buried Denmark, i.e. old Hamlet. By heaven I charge thee speak. It's interesting that there's an appeal to God there. By heaven I charge thee speak. So again, that might be running from the rational to the safety of religion there. Right. If I work my way through it, in 37.5 minutes, you're supposed to spend half the amount of an hour and 15 minutes, 75 minutes on Section A and Section B. You might opt for 40 on one and a bit less on the other, but really, if you did that in 37.5 minutes, you'd have a banger of an answer. Hopefully that's been useful. I'll put the links to all the things I've mentioned in the description. Leave a comment. Nobody ever does. That'd be nice for me to read. I may stop saying subby sub like you like, because we don't get many of those either. Them's the breaks, Mr. F. Them's the breaks. Alright. Stay safe, people, and bye for now.